The modern Republican Party, the party of Ronald Reagan, the party that Morton was helping back in those when you look just a little bit younger, not much, a little bit younger. Those Youth for Reagan back in the early 80s. Really about four principles: strong national defense, lower taxes, controlling spending, and defending traditional values. Those principles that make us great in the first place. Those are the things we have to continue to articulate. When we do that, we always connect with the American people, and we always win. When we shy away from those four principles, it's when we lose. It's my judgment why we lost in 2006. Frankly, we just spent too much money. We were great. I mean, you think about President Bush, and God bless him. He did a lot of things, I think, right. He understood the tax policy. He was as solid as could be there. He definitely understood the terrorist threat. He was great on defending those values: life, family, marriage, those key fundamental principles and values. But when it came to spending, he was wrong, just plain wrong. And the voters said, you know what? If for our voters, it's not good enough to be solid on three of the four or two of the four. Our voters are principled people. The American people are principled people. They want us to be rock solid on all four. And when we got away from the spending thing, we paid for it in election, in the election of 2006. And so it's important we do that. Let me just real quickly give you kind of a framework for evaluating where we're at now, what you're seeing the government attempt to do, and then I'll close and open up for questions. But I think it's important to understand we face three big challenges as a nation today. I said this when I first ran for Congress back in '06, and I think it's every bit as true today. Three big challenges we face, and it's important we recognize these, and then again articulate how we're gonna handle them, how we're gonna confront them, and I'm confident we will. One thing again, you all raised your hand because you, just like me, believe this is the greatest country ever, and one of the hallmarks of this nation is whatever the obstacle, whatever the hurdle, whatever's in front of us, we always figure out a way to deal with it. We always figure out a way to overcome it. It's just part of being an American. But three big challenges we face. The first is the terrorist threat. And trust me, this is as real as it gets. I always tell folks, just a country boy from Western Ohio, and when we first got elected, first took office, January of 2007, one of the things they do is they take all the new guys, new members to the House, new members to the Senate, take you to the Pentagon, they give you a briefing. The first part of the briefing is just general stuff you need to know. You learn about, you meet the liaison from the Army, the Air Force, the Navy, things that a congressional office needs to know how you're going to deal with. If you got a family who's got a son or daughter serving, and some things that basic stuff, good basic stuff you need to know. Second part of the briefing is they say, okay, we're going to take you down to another room. You go down to the other room, and they take your BlackBerry, your cell phone, you walk in, they close the door, and it's this big room, biggest map of the world I've ever seen, and they actually flash the word secret on the screen. And you can't talk about what they tell you in there, but part of it is just the intimidating, here I am, a country boy from Ohio sitting in this room at the Pentagon, and they're talking about what the world looks like. And it's serious. And it's important we remember that. When we're thinking about the kind of policies we're going to, it's important we remember there are people out there who do not like what we stand for and who want to do us harm. And we have got to understand that as we move forward as a nation. Second big threat, and it's what I've talked about already, is the economic challenge we face. I mean, it is real too. The emerging competitors in the international marketplace, this is real. There was a point in the past where politicians could do dumb things and it didn't really matter. Think about it. Coming out of World War II, we were going to be the economic superpower. We were the most free country. Europe was devastated. Japan was devastated. We were going to emerge as the greatest economic power in history, and we are. But today, with the competition we're now seeing from India and China, we have 304 million people in this country. China has 1,300,000,000 people in their country. They got 1 billion more people. Their economy is, it's growing. Now, obviously right now with this recession, all economies are depressed and we're in recession. But India has 800 million people. I mean, those economies, those big countries, the competition's now stiffer. We're at the point in history where it's incumbent upon the politicians to do it right for a change, to keep taxes low, get spending under control, and as I said, have an energy policy that has some common sense to it. So it's real important we understand what we're dealing with in an economic context and embrace those policies that have always worked. When you have low taxes, when you empower entrepreneurs and small business owners and families to go after their goals and dreams, pursue those things that have real meaning to them, good things happen. We saw it with Reagan. We've seen it whenever it's been tried. And then the third one, and again I've touched on this already, is this values debate that's going on in our culture. There is a debate over whose set of principles are going to win. And it's important that we never shy away from standing up and saying, you know what? There are certain fundamental principles that made us great in the first place, and we're going to defend them. And it's protecting human life. It's understanding the importance of family, that key institution in our culture, which in my judgment ultimately determines the strength of the entire society and how policies can protect. It's recognizing that faith in the public square has always been a part of the American experience, and we should continue that. But it's also respect for the free market, respect for the work ethic, respect for those fundamental principles that make us great. And we should never back away from defending it, even though we know the press will never give us a fair shake. I mean, Morton brought up the Washington. We get the Washington Times in our office each morning, too. It's one of those papers that actually pretty objective and pretty fair. Cal Thomas had a great line when he was talking about the national press, the elite, you know, the New York Times and Washington Post, the elite national press on the coast, and how there's a big difference between the way they think and the way normal people think. And he had a great line. He said, I get up every morning, I read my Bible and the New York Times so I can see what each side's up to. And there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, a lot of truth to that. So always remember, we're never going to get a fair shake. Just know the score before you start. We're always going to be ridiculed. Jordan's always that right-wing crazy guy who's fighting for balanced budgets and lower taxes and defending human life. That's fine. That's part of the challenge. That's one of the reasons I left coaching wrestling, which I like doing. It was fun to help student athletes try to get to their goals on the wrestling mat. But I love the fight of this, where you know the principles you believe in are the principles that matter for this country, and you get a chance to go debate and fight for them every single day. And it's a lot of fun. And so I want to thank you for doing that same thing, for standing up and saying, you know what? These principles are important, not just in the United States, but all over the world. And it's important that we defend it. And the United States has to lead. The world is a safer and better place when the United States leads. Again, the only folks who don't understand that is the editorial page of the New York Times. Most Americans get that instinctively, and it's important we do that. I'll finish with this. How many of you ever seen the movie Chariots of Fire? Anyone watched it? If you haven't watched it recently, watch it. It's a great show. For those of you who haven't seen it, the storyline is we follow a handful of British athletes in the early 1920s as they're preparing to compete in the 1924 Paris Olympic Games in the sport of track and field. And you really focus in on two in particular, Eric Liddell and Harold Abrahams. Both gifted athletes, both wind up being Olympic champions. Abrahams in the 100-meter dash, Eric Liddell in the 400-meter dash. The most compelling scene, in my judgment, took place prior to the Olympic Games. They're both college-age athletes. Abrahams is from England, Liddell's from up in Scotland. Both sprinters, of course. Both had never lost a race, undefeated, winning all the races. And so being athletes, being competitors, they just had to know, if the two of us race, who's going to win? Who's the fastest guy? And so there was a competition put together. They invited the fastest guys from all over Europe. Came time for the meet. Stadium was full. I mean, this was the event to be at that day. This is like the Final Four coming up. This is the sporting event to be at that day. And so came time for the 100-meter dash. They lined them up, fired the gun, had the race, and it was Eric Liddell first, Harold Abrahams second. Track meet's over. Harold Abrahams is now sitting up in the empty stand. There's a young lady sitting beside him, a lady that he would later marry. And Harold Abrahams is looking down at the empty track, and he is replaying this race in his mind over and over again. And every time it's the same result. It's Liddell first and him second. Liddell first, Abraham second. And it is driving him nuts because he's never lost. And he's going through this, and he hates it. I mean, being a competitor, he hates losing. He's going through this exercise. The young lady turns to him, and she knows what's going on, but she asks a rhetorical question. She says, Harold, what's the problem? So you lost. You finished second. You know, second's nothing to frown about. You've won all the others. Why the long face? And he turned back to her, and he said, I don't run to lose. I run to win. And if I can't win, I won't run. He's basically saying, I'm going to quit. I can't take what's associated with lose. I can't take the risk of doing this work and then actually falling short. It's just too tough. I don't want to do it. He was going to quit. There was a pause, and she turned back to him and said the best line of the whole show, the line that's all about this country. She turned back to him and she said, Harold, if you don't run, you can't win. And it's so, if you never are willing to risk it, if you're never willing to make that full commitment and step in the game, you can never accomplish anything of meaning or significance. And Americans have always been willing to get off the sideline, to get in the game, because that's where things happen. And that's what you all are doing. You're getting in the game. You're helping folks like me who are in the public policy arena. But this is about all Americans stepping in the game and saying, you know what, we're going to continue to have America be the greatest nation in history, protect those freedoms, those liberties that make us special in the first place. And so for that, I want to thank you, and I'll be happy to take your questions if you have any.